The second that Max Holloway started to speak during an appearance on UFC Tonight leading up to his featherweight title defense against Brian Ortega, it was apparent to anybody watching that something was seriously wrong.
The next fight is always the biggest fight, and Ortega is the next guy up. You know, he got a great team.
The slurring and slowed speech, the glazed over expression, these are instant red flags for any fight fan, or any fighter for that matter, like Michael Bisping, who would call it out right there on the broadcast.
You know, don't be offended when I say this, but you look like you just got out of bed. Are you tired? What's going on? How's the weight cut? You know, are you drained? I mean, you look a little sleepy.
The interview went out live on the Tuesday night of Fight Week, and by the time it hit social media, it was already apparent that this fight wasn't in jeopardy, it was over. The concern, of course, was for Max's safety, but you'd have been hard-pressed to find anybody who thought that fight was going ahead after seeing the interview. The next day, Holloway would be hospitalized and forced to withdraw from the bout. Max would make a full recovery from what exactly it's never been said, and he'd go on to beat Brian Ortega later that year. That interview, though, was a pinpoint that spelled the end for that title fight well before it was announced, which makes it the perfect jumping off point for our list and gets us rolling on the 10 exact moments we knew huge fights were doomed. Number 9, Diaz DOA. This has got to hold the record for the fastest conclusion a fight wasn't happening. The day that Nate Diaz versus Dustin Poirier was announced, the fight already felt like it probably wasn't going down. Now, it's not unusual for a Diaz to be late to a press conference or to just skip it altogether, but Nate seemed noticeably not at all interested in the bout with Poirier when he did finally show up.
It's time to go, so it's time to go.
But okay, again, the Diaz brothers aren't exactly company men at press conferences. At the end of the presser, though, Dana had a little surprise for everybody. Conor versus Khabib, oh my god. Yeah, Nate bounced during the video package, and then posted the following tweet. Well, alright then. Outside the venue, Nate trashed the UFC and was talking about a Tyron Woodley fight?
Dana White, they called me and offered me.
Did you want Woodley?
I don't want nobody, but they offered me Woodley. I was like, well, shit, a title fight.
The whole thing was a clusterfuck, and fans immediately knew the fight happening was a miracle. Nate and Dustin would randomly say 2 months later that the fight was for the new 165-pound title, something Dana immediately shut down, and about a month before the fight, Dustin said Nate was being too difficult, and so he was just gonna take care of a hip injury, fight canceled, as if anybody had any doubt minutes after its announcement. Number 8.
I want to fuck Chuck.
There was really only one thing standing in the way of a legendary crossover champion versus champion fight between Pride's Vanderlei Silva and the UFC's Chuck Liddell, Babalu. At least that's what everybody thought, which is to say, the mega fight seemed like a full-on lock. At UFC 61, Dana infamously brought Silva to the cage to announce the big-time bout.
If Chuck gets past Babalu Sobral, Vanderlei Silva versus Chuck Liddell!
That next pay-per-view after the announcement, the only thing that needed to happen was Chuck defend the light heavyweight title against Renato Sobral. Ballsy move to announce the fight a month before Liddell was scheduled for a defense, but that wouldn't turn out to be the problem. You want to know the literal exact moment that fans knew this fight was a no-go? 5 minutes and 25 seconds into Vanderlei Silva's heavyweight GP bout with Mirko Cro Cop just 2 weeks after Liddell defended his gold. The knockout loss immediately killed the fight for 2 reasons. 1, Silva just got knocked out by somebody for the first time since 1998, and 2, because the fight was scheduled to be so soon, Nevada wasn't going to let the recently concussed Vandy compete, and so the dream died, at least until over a year later, when both men had lost their subsequent championships and were no longer on the top of the sport. Thanks a lot, Mirko Cro Cop. Actually, thanks a lot, Pride FC, you lunatics. Number 7, Cain talks too much. You could have just read the headline of the ESPN interview with Cain Velasquez to guess that his rematch with Fabricio Verdum, a massively anticipated heavyweight fight, probably wasn't going to go well. But shit, 2 sentences in, you discovered that Cain can't even stand for more than 10 minutes at a time. Last time I checked, MMA fights were longer than 10 minutes. I guess you do get to sit between rounds, and you could pull guard or something. Let Cain fight, you cowards. Not only was Velasquez more or less crippled 9 days before the fight, but he was scheduled for back surgery less than a week after. something he also disclosed. Now, it was a minor back surgery, but that is an oxymoron. No back surgery is minor. The article immediately raised red flags with fans and with Nevada, who were like, oh shit, maybe we need to go back and do a better evaluation of this guy. And they did. And they canceled the fight. Shocking. Kane would at least get to have his surgery and heal his back up, but holy hell, if you planned on gutting that fight out, probably don't tell Brett Okamoto your body is broken because he's gonna snitch.
You know what happens to snitches?
They get immunity.
Number 6. Fedor's open letter. For a couple years there after Pride fell, the UFC tried to lock down Fedor for a contract, and they never got it to happen. But for as long as Fedor was the top guy in the sport, everybody wanted to know what would happen if he fought the UFC's champions. Insert whoever was at that moment. Brock Lesnar, Randy Couture, hell, even Tim Sylvia. We actually got that one, and it went exactly how you'd think.
When I punched him, he dropped so quickly I thought he was diving towards the ground.
And while we'd learn years later that an ill-fated island meeting would spell the end of a potential $30 million Brock Lesnar fight, when it was Randy's turn prior to that, we got a rare shot across the bow from Fedor himself. It was February of 2008. Couture was right in the middle of having walked out of the UFC, literally citing the inability to sign Fedor. They'd just made an interim title holder out of Big Nog when Fedor released an open letter to Dana White over the situation. The gist of it was, hey Dana, stop being a dumb fuck and let me fight Randy, or let me fight Big Nog. But the reason this letter perfectly encapsulates doom for all Fedor UFC fights is the final line. I'm signed with M1 Global, and this promotion is ready to organize such fights under our banner or in co-promoted events. Oh dear God, Fedor. Everybody and their mom knew the UFC was co-promoting with exactly dick all other promotions ever, and that one sentence is the central conflict in the entire Fedor UFC saga. Number 5. DJ's open letter. Jesus Christ, there are 2 open letters in this video? Scratch that. There are 2 open letters that have ever happened in MMA, period? Somehow, the answer is yes, and both very fittingly represent moments of doom for huge fights. This time around, we're talking the biggest little fight ever, Demetrius Johnson versus TJ Dillashaw. Everybody's favorite snake in the grass was supposed to settle that beef with TAM, but word was that Cody Garbrandt's back was injured, and so Dillashaw told ESPN that Dana White was all for him heading down to 125 to take on Demetrius Johnson instead. There was big buzz for this one, and after a month of pressure to take the fight, Johnson penned a lengthy letter that really just put every single issue he had with the UFC over his career out there.
Show me the money. Yeah. Simple as that.
With a major portion of it being about why he didn't want the Dillashaw fight. He was worried TJ wouldn't make weight and nullify his title defense record, that the UFC wouldn't compensate him if that happened, that they were bullying him publicly to force him into the fight, which, to be fair, the letter went into his overall sentiment towards the promotion as well, and there was zero chance in hell that if you saw that letter, you thought this fight was going to happen. You probably didn't think that flyweight was going to exist much longer.
They never pulled ratings, they never pulled pay-per-views. It just, I don't know.
Number 4, Lesnar works everybody. Was a fight between Brock Lesnar and then heavyweight champion Daniel Cormier in 2019 stupid? Absolutely. Did I want to see the shit out of it? I mean, didn't everybody? I'm sure you all remember the setup. DC becomes the double champ, calls out Lesnar, Bork gets into the cage, pushy shovey woo woo, and we're off to the races. Brock re-entered the USADA testing pool the day after the viral confrontation. Now we just needed to let this thing cook for the next 6 months until the Beast Incarnate was eligible. They'd have given him an exemption, but that didn't work out too great last time. Anyway, things were a bit too quiet on this massive moneymaker fight, and if you ask this cartoon man, it was never going to happen. But the moment most of us knew it was doomed was when in late 2018, Brock re-upped his contract with the WWE. Now, he'd had the ability to do both in his contract, but word around the campfire was that Lesnar had used this whole UFC saga to worry the WWE that he might not re-up his contract and leveraged it for a better deal. Interestingly enough, we would find out much later that Cormier would get back surgery a month after that re-signing by Lesnar. Now, if that fight was supposed to happen 3 months later, no chance in hell DC gets the surgery beforehand and misses out. He knew Lesnar was done. It wouldn't be until right around the time that fight was supposed to take place that Dana White finally officially broke the news that Brock had retired from mixed martial arts and that the Cormier fight was never happening.
No, he's done. He's made his decision.
Something most fans assumed after Lesnar's new WWE deal got inked. Number 3, Party Time Conor. I think when you realized the fight between Conor McGregor and Michael Chandler wasn't going to happen, says something about who you are as a person. There's layers to this fight's doom. If you're a bit more cynical, you thought it wasn't going to happen from the moment it was made official for UFC 303. And honestly, who the hell could blame you? Normally, after two fighters coach tough against each other, they have a fight within some small window of the show. That's kind of one of the whole points of having them as coaches, to build up a fight. We didn't get an official date on Conor Chandler until nearly a year after their season of Tough started airing. But if you were one of the hopeful ones that wasn't deterred by that, you probably lost hope 6 weeks after the fight was made official, and just a month from the bout, when Conor appeared to be doing anything but focusing on getting ready for a fight. But even if you were somehow like, you know what, Conor's got this under control, he's just letting a little steam off before he gets back in the cage for the first time in 3 years, you were definitely completely done with believing in this fight when a scheduled press conference less than a month out in Dublin was canceled out of the blue right before it was meant to take place. That was the doom spot for the most hopeful among us. 10 days later, we'd find out about Conor's pinky toe injury, and this long, painful process was over. Number 2, Wilder money.
To this day,
Dana White isn't a hard guy to read. He very much wears his heart on his sleeve, and so when you get a certain tone out of Dana and he phrases something in a certain way, you know exactly what it is he thinks. In early 2020, there was a bunch of buzz about a potential fight between Jon Jones and Francis Ngannou at heavyweight, but things quickly devolved when money came up. Jones rightly wanted better compensation for taking the risk of moving up to heavyweight. The UFC decided they weren't having any of that. After all, these were hard times for the promotion. This was Pandusky times, remember? What would end up being one of the UFC's biggest boom periods. Anyway, if you were paying much attention, things weren't looking great from the jump based on JBJ's ever insightful Twitter account. But the nail in the coffin that made everybody go, oh, okay, yeah, this fight is never happening, was when Dana went scorched earth on Jones and claimed he wanted $30 million for the fight.
yeah, it's fun working out in the gym in the morning, seeing tweets from Jon Jones saying I'm lying. Told my lawyer he wants what Deontay Wilder was paid.
Now, did he want $30 million? I have no idea. But not a damn soul saw that clip and thought, okay, yeah, this is going great. 3 months later, Jones would vacate his light heavyweight title and spend nearly 3 years away from the cage, by which point Ngannou wasn't even in the UFC anymore. Which isn't to say there weren't other attempts during that period to make the fight. There were, but it all came down to that sound bite from Dana, and if you ask me, it's the same reason we're never going to get that Aspinall fight either. Number 1, Lockdown Blues. Look, by 2020, 5 full-on attempts into making Tony versus Khabib, I think most of us would take any negative sign to mean that the fight was going to get canceled. But dude, when you add in COVID lockdowns, I mean, there's just absolutely no chance in hell anybody thought this fight was happening prior to the official announcement that it was off. So here's how things went down. First, the fight is announced for mid-April in New York. The announcement came in December of 2019 when none of us had any clue that people just started not being able to taste their food in Wuhan. By March, New York shut down mass gatherings, and the commission said you gotta move the card somewhere else. It was already dicey that the event was going to take place at all in that moment, but far more devastating news had taken place at the same time if you were paying attention. Russia started banning travel in and out of the country. Now, because of restrictions in California, Khabib was forced to finish his camp back in Russia. But with the new travel bans, Khabib was stuck there and would take to Instagram Live to discuss the issue.
I know, brother, everybody crazy, but they say I have to fly somewhere, but nobody knows location.
The writing was all over the wall. There was no way this fight was happening, and sure enough, the day after the live about being unable to travel, Khabib announced that he would have to pull out of the fight. And just a few days after that, UFC made it official that Justin Gaethje would be stepping in. The most cursed fight ever, picked the most cursed time in recent memory to give it one last go, and we will never get over it. But you know who could help us heal? The editor of this video, Max Randall. Please follow him on all his socials, and go check out his awesome YouTube channel. The guy is the best. A massive thank you to our channel members. Your support is so greatly appreciated. Fight fans, hit the join button, get exclusive content. There's one low price. Highly recommend it. Like and subscribe, or the rest of your life will have to be co-promoted by M1 Global. Leave a comment about how you reacted to these doomed moments as they happened, and thank you so much for watching. Be safe out there.